Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Brett Bodkins, and I'm typically a landscape photographer. However, for the last 2 years or so, I've had to sort of put that on the back burner and concentrate on raising my infant daughter instead. So during those 2 years, I've spent a little bit of time making a few YouTube videos about usually photography or photography gear, and today I wanted to do something a little bit different. So a couple weeks ago, I actually took a 1,000-kilometer or about 630-mile solo motorcycle trip around Peru for the express purpose of being able to try to do some landscape photography. So I did want to mention that being on a basic commuter bike, I knew I was going to have to travel quite light. And so I had made a plan that I was going to only take one lens. Now, this means that quite a few times on the trip, I had an idea that I could not actually achieve for whatever reason. And so that was going to happen quite a bit, and I knew that in advance. It was a very cool, interesting trip, and I actually got thinking that I wanted to talk about whether or not you should consider using a motorcycle for that type of endeavor. Now, some of you may be interested in this more from the photographic angle. However, there also may be some of you interested in seeing photos of Peru, getting to experience it a little more, or maybe you're interested in actually visiting Peru yourself, or visiting some of the cities I went to along the way, that sort of thing. And so I hope this can maybe be something that will interest you guys. Now, the main purpose of this video is whether or not you should use a motorcycle to try to do landscape photography in particular. And this may not apply too much to a first world country where, car ownership is more common and more accessible. You guys have really nice highways, that sort of thing. So that may not be as big of a factor for you, but if you're traveling in most other countries around the world, most countries in Central or South America, Africa, Western Europe, Middle East, that sort of thing, then you may find this a little bit more applicable. Now, there are a lot of things that I won't be able to truly explain or describe because of major differences in, culture and, just in infrastructure, that sort of thing. However, I will say that I've traveled Peru in lots of different ways. I've traveled by airplane, by bus, by car. I've walked, I've used bicycles, I've now used a motorcycle. And I will say that motorcycle seems to me to be one of the best ways to get around Peru. And it may also be the case for many other countries around the world. Now, there are a lot of pros and cons to using a motorcycle for that kind of travel, and I experienced one of the main cons whenever I had an accident on the first night. I actually pulled a Superman over the handlebars when I hit a thick patch of gravel and landed chest first. Luckily, nothing was broken, just some bruised ribs and that sort of thing. But it did derail a lot of the trip and made doing photography much harder during the trip. And so I wanted to talk about some of the pros and cons and sort of give you a little bit of insight. Now, some of the roads around Peru are pretty good, but especially as you're going through the Andes mountain range, quite a few of the roads will probably disintegrate quite a bit. And you may find yourself in a situation where you're exceeding your, motorbike skills or the limits of your bike itself. Now, me personally, I bought a street bike, commuter bike for the express purpose of, being able to possibly take it on longer trips on the roads. However, the, tires and the setup aren't necessarily ideal for off-roading and some of the conditions that I definitely experienced in the mountains here in Peru. Now, if you're more interested in some of the details about my trip, I did do a blog on my website that you can check out, and I'm not going to go into all the same stuff here or vice versa, so you can still maybe get something new. If you did read the blog, you might still be able to get something new from watching this video. Now, the first thing that I'm going to mention about traveling by motorcycle in Peru is that there are a lot of roads that look like major roads when you look at them on a map that will, however, not be when you get there. In order to deal with that, I tried to find information online about the routes. There's a whole lot of ambiguity about that. You will find that there's not a lot of good information about the routes. The way that I tried to deal with that is by asking people that lived in those areas before I started out a road or tried to make it to a city. I would ask them about the route to the next city and see what they said. However, I found that, here in Peru, a lot of people are sort of hesitant to admit when they don't know something, and sometimes they'll sort of fudge the truth in order to, not come off as ignorant or something about a particular subject. And so I found that the information was not particularly accurate, and sometimes the roads were way worse, and sometimes they were good. It's just, it can really depend. So my advice on that is to actually be prepared for pretty much whatever. Now, in order for me to do that, I did bring a hammock and hope that I could, sleep in a hammock if I needed to get off the road, whether it just be because you're so tired or because you, don't want to be on the roads by yourself at night in a, remote region, that sort of thing. I wanted to come home alive, and I wanted to try to make sure that all my gear and things that I wasn't robbed or anything like that. So I did run into some problems. I got bit by something pretty crazy in the night, and so I actually had to get back on the road. So I found that hammock wasn't necessarily the best option in certain places. It is a tropical zone. There are a lot of creatures and things that can cause you problems. Now, my second advice is that you really want to try to end your day fairly early and find a place to stay, and then you can sort of explore a little bit from there. One problem for me with landscape photography in particular, you generally need to be somewhere when the best lighting is going to occur. And in order to do that, if you're doing it at the beginning of the day, you have to travel in the dark to get there before the light happens. At night, you have to travel in the dark to get home after it happens. So for me, that's one of the main things about landscape photography is that, you really have to go through some extreme conditions and situations in order to do that. It's not necessarily always safe in Peru to be out doing that. So quite a few of the images that I took during my trip were made with, non-ideal lighting and that sort of thing. And so, there are quite a few images that I would never use for any kind of portfolio or anything like that. There's only a couple of what I would consider keepers from my trip. Of course, I probably would have been able to get a lot more of them had I not had the accident the first night. And, that made it very hard for me to get on and off the bike and hard to deal with all the bumps in the roads. And, so anyway, there was a whole lot of things that would have been much easier had I taken my time on that first day. Now, I did want to explain that when I went down on that first night, the reason is that I was paying way too much attention to the lighting in the sky and the colors of the setting sun and that sort of thing. I was trying desperately to find a place to shoot from that I could get a good composition with. And so, I couldn't shut off my photography mind long enough to pay attention to the road. And so that was one of the things that I did very wrong at the very beginning. When you're riding a motorcycle, you really need to be paying attention to the road and not always to what's going on around you. So I did learn my lesson on that, and I would suggest that you try to learn that from me. Now, I will mention that many of these roads are very bad. Some of the roads, you'll commonly find that there's a lot of, very rutted, muddy mud holes, you have lots of gravel and rock, and rock falls. You have the road falls away from the mountain. You have streams and rivers that go across the road. There's a whole lot of things that happen in the mountain roads in particular. And so if you've never been on that kind of road, you probably wouldn't know how to really conceive of the idea. However, you could probably find some videos on YouTube where you could see that kind of stuff, because I didn't actually take a GoPro along with me for this trip. I wanted to concentrate on landscape photography. Now, one thing to look out for when you're traveling in Peru, quite a lot at altitude, you will find, even in the summertime, that you will have snow-capped mountains. Sometimes those snow-capped mountains are just in the distance and they're nice to look at. However, you have to be careful with some of the mountain passes in some of the roads that you're taking. If you're going to be traveling by motorcycle, the ice and snow could be very dangerous. Make sure you have appropriate clothing and things like that. Also, rear-wheel drive, two wheels can be quite dangerous on those kind of roads. So just something to think about. I actually changed my destination and my route because of the possibility of running into ice and snow. Alright guys, so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about with this video. There's a whole lot more detail on my blog if you're interested in the trip itself. And I think that I just wanted to kind of bring up the idea for discussion and have you consider whether or not you would like to take a trip like that, if you would like to try to use a motorcycle for landscape photography. And so anyway, if you get any questions about my trip, feel free to ask me in the comments, and read my blog, maybe see if you find some of the details there as well. Take care, guys.